there, and welcome along to this, the best of all time. On the 7th of September 1892, the first gloved heavyweight championship of the world was fought out when gentleman Jim Corbett beat the seasoned bare-knuckler John L. Sullivan in the 21st round. Boxing has changed since those days, but one question that over the years has caused more fights outside the ring than in it: who is or was the greatest heavyweight of all time? Lewis or Marciano, Ali or Tyson, not to forget the likes of Dempsey or Johnston or any of the other greats of the past. And tonight I'm joined by three guests who have the unenviable task of naming the best heavyweight of all time. It's a pleasure to welcome, for 10 rounds of debate, a unanimous decision is the only outcome, I'm afraid. First up, Barry McGuigan, better known in the ring as the Clonus Cyclone in his fighting days, world featherweight champion back in the mid-80s, now part of our own team on Sky Sports. Welcome, Barry. We're also joined by Colin Hart, the boxing correspondent of The Sun, who's witnessed most of the biggest fights in the world over the past 3 decades and more. Great to be with you, Colin. And by Reg Guttridge, one of the best-known commentators from the age of television and radio. And between them, these boys know all there is to know about boxing. Why don't we start by going through some of the contenders? As we do that, we're obviously going to pick out some great fights from previous eras as well. But Colin, one thought: we've all witnessed one of the high points of this sporting year in Las Vegas, the meeting of Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield, and the incredible show business razzmatazz that surrounds a big fight in the United States. But you've reminded me that this is nothing new in boxing, going way back into the last century.
Absolutely. I mean, the World Heavyweight Championship has always been known as the richest prize in sport, and the World Heavyweight Champion, from whatever era you care to name, has always been one of the most recognisable people on earth, known worldwide. It has that charisma to it, and there's been some wonderful examples. As you say, Gene Tunney, Jack Dempsey, Jack Johnson, Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, you could go on and on and on, covering the whole century. There have been 1 or 2 heavyweight champions, of course, who are not very well known or remembered, people like Jack Sharkey. Max Schmeling was famous for the Lewis fight, not for the fact that he won and is the only world heavyweight champion to win the title on a disqualification.
As theatrical events, has heavyweight boxing always given us one of the most dramatic events in sport?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you remember going back in history, the first $1 Million Gate was when Jack Dempsey fought Georges Carpentier.
That was a lot of money.
It's the first $1 Million Gate. I mean, never been known before in the history of the world. And going back even further, when Tex Rickard, the famous American promoter, he was the one, I suppose, who brought the World Heavyweight Championship into world recognition. Every corner of the earth knew that there was a World Heavyweight Championship taking place. Everybody wanted to know the result. And it was Tex Rickard, through Jack Dempsey, who gave the title perhaps the first hint of glamour that it's maintained throughout the years.
I guess even before the age of radio and television, the great message, a medium for these stories, was the newspaper.
Yes, the Telegraph, in fact, where they used to tap out the results and the report of the fight in Morse code, as it happened when, I believe, Fitzsimmons beat Corbett for the title in Carson City. I can't remember the year, but it was before World War I.
Do you know, they still kept that Morse code going even to the 50s. Because the fight I did in Chicago with Ray Robinson and Carmen Basilio, they'd only just stopped using them. In fact, one Western Union operator was still using them. And the newspaper fellows, we had that was then called Telex, but at least you could sort of look over, and this single tape came out those days, and you could see what you'd written. But with that Morse code, you were just hoping this guy was doing what you had written and it would appear in the paper, not, my way and not his way.
Television and before that radio must have done so much to spread the popularity.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's radio. I mean, they still talk of the Tommy Farr and Joe Louis, or Louis as we call him over here, fight. I mean, everybody would tell you, I listened to that on my crystal set, and all the miners in Wales, everybody had a day off, none of the night shift were working, Media has played a vital part, actually, in it.
James J. Corbett is the man that we start with, Barry, from the turn of the century. What do we know about him?
Well, he was the first real boxer. Before that, we had John L. Sullivan, who was a strong, robust, big, heavy-handed guy and would bludgeon you to the floor. James J. Corbett was the first sort of fancy Dan, as it were, a beautiful boxer and a good mover. He didn't move that much because they couldn't. In many of the days, the rings weren't great, but he was very mobile, and he used his boxing ability to frustrate and outbox and wear down the aging John L. Sullivan.
You know what I think? I think Errol Flynn might have beaten him. I mean, Errol Flynn took his part in the film, and from looking at these crotchety old films, and I do make allowances for that, we get a different conception of a fight sometimes with those black and white flickeries. But I wasn't very impressed with Corbett from that point of the film, and I think old Errol might have had a shot with him.
Tell me this, Reg, why did we move away from bare-knuckle fighting to gloves? Was this for reasons of good taste or safety?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, they had to bring gloves in there. I mean, they're still trying to alter things to this moment, aren't they? Something else has got to be introduced, heavier gloves and so forth. Yeah, I think there's a question of law at the time.
To make it more civilized, I suppose, because if the funny thing is, you know, if we really sort of get into the technicalities of it, and I don't want to do that at this stage, this is not what this program's about. In actual fact, when they couldn't wear gloves, they couldn't hit as hard because it would hurt their hands, and therefore they couldn't punch as hard. So they introduced the gloves to make the fellas' faces less marked up. But it also allowed guys to hit harder.
You know, when you think that when gloves
true.
first came in, they were 2 ounces and 4 ounces. Now they're 10 ounces for heavyweights. Now, could you imagine punchers like Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Mike Tyson, Joe Lewis wearing 2 or 4 ounce gloves? Do you imagine the damage that those guys would have done?
And the other thing is, Colin, that they used to use horsehair. They didn't bring foam gloves in until the late 60s, early 70s. They used to use horsehair, and in fact, in some countries they still use them. A combination of horsehair and foam gloves.
Barry, those horsehair gloves were used in the '63 fight with the then Cassius Clay and Henry Cooper. They were horsehair gloves, and the tear that we all talked about was actually on the thumb of the stitching had come out, and there are pictures out, Monte Fresco took it actually, of the hair flying out in the round before they tried to change it. In fact, it was never changed. But you're quite right. I remember very well as a kid, because all my family were involved in boxing, the instructors and everything. And they'd come home and I'd always be trying to break up the hair gloves for them and make them a bit softer for the fight. That was the cheating going on then.
Can we go back to the Corbett? When he lost the title, which was to it's a tenuous link with Britain, of course, Bob Fitzsimmons in Carson City. That fight was famous also because a new punch was introduced into boxing by a newspaper man. I think it was
you, Colin?
Well, it wasn't. It was there all the time.
It sounds like a sound story.
Barry was reminding me that it was Fitzsimmons' wife who yelled out to Bob, "Hit him in the slats, Bob," and she meant hit him in the body, and he did. I think it was the 14th round. He hit him with a body shot, and all the air went out of Corbett, and he sank to his knees and was counted out. And a newspaper man invented the punch. He called it the solar plexus punch, which hadn't been heard of before then, and of course it became part of boxing law. Right. When people got knocked out with a body punch, it became known as the Fitzsimmons solar plexus punch.
Now, Colin, we know you weren't around on the 17th of March, 1897, when this did happen. When Bob Fitzsimmons captured this world title, how much impact did that have in Britain at the time?
I don't think it had a great deal of impact in Britain at all. So. I mean, don't forget, Bob Fitzsimmons was born in Cornwall. I think it was Helston,
yeah.
And then he went to New Zealand as a very young child, and when he won the world heavyweight title, despite what we may think, he was an American citizen.
He was an American citizen, that's right.
So the link with Britain was tenuous. It was only years later, when we were striving to find a man to win the world heavyweight title, that we claimed Bob Fitzsimmons. But I don't think it had any impact in Britain, particularly the fact that he was born in Cornwall at that time. And
people forget too, Colin, that he just didn't win the heavyweight title. He never weighed more than 165 pounds. And when he won the title, he actually weighed 168. He won the heavyweight title, and he went and won the middleweight title and the light heavyweight title as well. So he was quite an incredible fighter.
But at that weight today, Barry, he wouldn't have won a round, let's face it. These fellas have been much too big for him and throw too many punches
But to be fair, Reg,
he was a bit of a statue.
In those days, the men weren't that big. I mean, people don't realise that Jack Dempsey, when he won the world title, was only 13 stone 3.
That's right.
And going into the 50s, Marciano, when he won the night he won the title, weighed 13 stone 2.
Our Henry's best weight was 13.5.
Yeah, 35,
so he'd have been a
36.
cruiserweight.
But it's interesting.
Even a light cruiserweight.
Absolutely.
It's interesting now that we have the 21st century heavyweights, guys that weigh 17, 18 stone. But to my mind, I don't know how you feel about it, Muhammad was 15-7, 15-10, never weighed more than that. Tyson was 15-7, 15-10, and Holyfield 15-5.
Yeah.
So, is that the best weight division? Or is that the best weight in the heavyweight division?
They're very mobile, aren't they, all those you've mentioned? I mean, mobile fighters.
I mean,
I can't get over the size of these guys now.
When he beat Liston, he weighed exactly 15 stone. But when he came to fight Cooper, at Wembley at Highbury in 1966, he was about 14.5. He realised he had to be a bit faster for Henry Cooper, having felt the left hook 3 years earlier, which put him down. And so he slimmed down from 15 to 14.5 for some extra speed.
One has the impression quite clearly that Chris Eubank and any of the latter-day showmen of boxing had nothing on these men at this period. They were quite willing and able to spread their popularity beyond the narrow confines of the sport.
Just that they get so much more exposure now through television. That's what's done it. There's no question they become television fighters. In America, one of the first sort of modern television fighters was Kid Gavilan, because he was spectacular. He threw, attractive-looking fighter without all the gimmicks, by the way. But no, that's I get a bit upset about it with all these. They look like wrestlers. They wear skirts. The great fighters never did that. And Tyson, to his credit, and Holyfield, they do dress and look like boxers when they get in there. But I know they're going to say that's a typical old fart.
No, but it's not. No, but we're talking about the greatest of all time here. Let's be totally blunt and to the point. I don't think you can realistically compare someone like Eubank with the likes of... It's an insult to compare him with the likes of Ray Robinson and the likes of...
We're talking about heavyweights.
Let's restrict it here to the heavyweights. Okay, the point I was just trying to make was that the likes of Fitzsimmons, by report, would go to vaudeville shows and try to make the most of his earning potential at the time.
Well, John L. Sullivan appeared in plays on stage.
So did Dempsey.
And Dempsey did, but so did Corbett. They say, don't they, that boxing is show business with blood. Yeah. And there's always that touch of show business to it. Yeah. Dempsey was probably one of the most glamorous champions.
Handsome, too.
Of this century, in the 20s. Because a lot of these guys, I mean, I'm going to upset a lot of people, but they were myths. When you look at their record and look what they didn't do, rather than what they did do, then they become myths in my mind. Jack Dempsey won the title in 1919 and lost it in 1926. That's 7 years. He only had 7 fights.
Yeah.
Not only that, he wouldn't fight a man called Harry Wills, who was considered to be the best heavyweight in the world. And the reason he wouldn't fight him, because Harry Wills was black. Now, Dempsey goes down in history as one of the all-time greats. Not to me, he doesn't. He was a very good heavyweight in his time, but I wouldn't class him as an all-time great.
The only thing I would say there, that probably it was the manager, Doc Kearns, who wouldn't let him fight.
Exactly.
I would hate to think that Dempsey was scared of anybody. Can I tell a Dempsey story, by the way? The first time I met him was in his restaurant, which was our Queen's property that owned that, by the way. And I was so pleased just to say, I've forgotten, he must have been 60 by then, or even more, I think. And I know he was telling everybody how upset he was at weekends when old guys would come in and say, hit me on the chin, Jack. He said, because I want to say the champion of the world hit me on the chin. And he said, I'm losing my punch, he was saying. But as I'm talking to him, a fellow came up, sort of a Brando-ish, and he looked at him and he's giving it, hey, champ, and you know how they do the acting bit. And Dempsey got hold of him. He said, I'll give you the bum's rush. You keep this up. And I thought, oh, dear, Jack, it's not like you, is it? And he got hold of him and he threw him out the front door. And I was terribly embarrassed. The first time I'd ever met Dempsey, was he? And then he came out and he's roaring with laughter. And I said, what's up? He said, he's one of the best actors in Broadway. He said, he comes in and does this every damn week. And every damn week I've got to learn how to throw him out again. You know? Yeah.
In between the years of Fitzsimmons and Corbett and Dempsey,
we had Jeffries.
We had Jeffries, and we had Jack Johnson, who was important to the story for other reasons. Tell me a little bit about those.
Jeffries was 6'6", 230 pounds, massive guy. Was one of the real sort of big guys, and he steamrolled over the top of Fitzsimmons and held the title for quite a few years. And he was big and white and obviously a tremendously powerful big man. Hadn't got great, judging by the books, hadn't got great natural coordination or ability, but his power allowed him to overpower most of the guys that were around at the time. Then he vacated the title and retired, and we had Marvin Hart who came in. Marvin Hart, incidentally, only had one eye. would never have passed him for his box.
No relation.
No relation. I said that. No relation.
No relation.
He's always got both eyes open. This part of the family.
You don't have to tell me that. And then he was beaten by Burns, the Canadian, French Canadian, and Tommy Burns then fought the great, the fabulous and incredible fighter Jack Johnson. I thought Johnson, we're talking about all-time greats, one of the greatest heavyweights. I don't know how you guys feel
I do.
about
I accept that. Well, he boxed at Plymouth, didn't he, once? Again, back to the family talk, my grandfather apparently went all the way down there, which was like having a passport from North London to go down to Plymouth.
Long
those
journey,
days.
yeah.
And, and he came back and he said, gee, this guy knows everything about the game. He says, one of the best I've ever seen. So he obviously was. I mean, and I know Ali on a couple of occasions have been in conversation with him, and he always said, I wish I could have fought Jack Johnson. We'd have had a lot of fun together. We'd have had a lot of fun
Jack
together.
Johnson's one of the greatest names
Oh, without doubt.
in boxing across the weight divisions. And, of course, a fascinating character. I mean, he was hated in the United States because of his lifestyle. He was the Ali of his day. He was flamboyant. He was also black in a racist society. And, of course, he upset America because he had a passion for white women. And that's one of the reasons why he left the United States and came to Britain. That's why he ended up in Plymouth. And he fought, I believe, didn't he fight in more than one place in this country?
I can't
And
remember
in Paris.
And he
Yeah,
jumped
he fought in
bail.
Paris.
And,
And he actually
of
jumped
course,
bail at the time.
he was there was a warrant for his arrest in the United States because he contravened what they called the Mann Act by taking
That's right.
a woman across a state line, happened to be a white woman. And of course he married, he had a white wife. And of course he was, he used to flaunt his wealth. He used to drive
Cars
equivalent
with
of...
But it
a lot of it was a
voices
conscious political statement that he was making at the
and-
time.
Oh,
wasn't
absolutely.
it?
He was getting them at it, and he did it brilliantly, of course.
Yeah,
And he must have been
And it
such
was-
a brave man in
And
the
he had the
period.
old gold teeth.
Yeah, he had the
and-
gold tooth. That's right, before
Right.
Tyson.
That's
the way.
right.
And that's where we'll just have to draw a halt for just a moment or two. Join us again for more fascinating discussion after the break.
These ice-cool Europeans played us off the table in last year's Moscone Cup. Now the US of A is out for some revenge. Hustling pool style. The Moscone Cup starts Thursday at 2, live on Sky Sports.
Many believe basketball is the hottest game on earth. Now you can prove it. NBA Live 97. It's in the game.
Braun's Style Shaper's like a hairbrush, only better. A gas cartridge heats it up in just 90 seconds to bring back the volume, smoothness and style to your hair when you need it most. Braun's Style Shaper, one hot little hairbrush. The Braun Super Volume Twist gives you volume and just twist to get something really different. The Super Volume Twist, volume with a twist.
Miss, Miss, Pizza Hut pan pizzas, unless I'm mistaken. Thank you, Miss. Come on, Gareth, it only took me 6 years to get over it. Have some pan pizza.
Pan pizza from Pizza Hut. A light, fluffy base with a crispy crust smothered with generous toppings.
Thanks a lot, boys. I feel much better now. Ooh, this time is it the post?
Pizza Hut pan pizza. It always hits the spot.
So, come on! Okay, let's hit it! Where we go, Daddy-o!
With National Lottery Instants, you could win £1,000. Or £5,000. Or maybe just £100. Forget it all for an instant.
Morning.
Morning, Dad.
Oh, yeah, I must sort out that loan. But I can't get to the bank.
Hello! There's a new convenient way to get an unsecured personal loan. Call Lombard Direct, free on 0800 215,000. 24 hours a day. We have loans from £800 to £15,000 for almost anything, and our rates are low. One call to Lombard Direct, and you're laughing. To arrange a loan or for more information, call free on 0800 2 15,000.
He's still engaged. What are we going to do with him, Boo-Boo? It can't be his mother at this time of night. Right, now there's going to be trouble.
Why try and try when you can just press 5? Because with BT's new ringback service, when they finally get off the line, you'll be called back.
Hello.
It's me.
Hi, Susie.
No, it's Brenda, actually.
Don't try and try. Just press 5.
We've started an argument that may take some time to settle. Barry McGuigan, Colin Hart and Reg Guttridge alongside me as we debate the merits of some of the finest heavyweights in world boxing history. After the early stars of the turn of the century and up to the 1920s, a period of relative instability followed. Tunney, Schmeling, Sharkey, Carnera, Baer and Braddock, all champions, but none of them really able to hold the fort for too long and establish themselves as stars in world boxing. Colin, it seemed like we needed a big star by the time the 1930s started.
Yes, I mean, after Dempsey era, I think the heavyweight championship declined into a state of mediocrity. I mean, Sharkey, and with all due respect to them, Sharkey, Baer, Braddock, Schmeling even, they weren't great fighters in the true sense of the word. And as you say, the world was looking for a new star, and they found one. And they found one in the shape of Joe Louis. And Joe, of course, wouldn't have been a world heavyweight champion in the 20s, there's no doubt about that, because there was a colour bar in the United States at that time. They did not want another black heavyweight like Jack Johnson. And so Joe was fortunate that he emerged in the middle to late 30s, and he won the title in 1937, and by knocking out James J. Braddock, and he held it, of course, for more than 11 years. And it's one of the great careers in the history of boxing in any division. And Joe was a star, but a quiet, modest star. He was told by the people that ran him, a man called Black, I believe was his manager, yes, and his trainer was Chappie Blackburn, and he had been told, look, when you knock out the white guy, don't throw up your arms in triumph, just turn around and go back to the corner. He had to put, he daren't put a foot out of place. He had to say the right things, he had to behave in exactly the right way, otherwise he would not have been accepted by the American public or the world.
But that was his demeanour anyway. He was that sort of a, mellow sort of...
Can I make a point? I've just read the latest book on Joe Louis. You know, he had many mistresses, he lived a very flamboyant lifestyle, but the media never got to hear about it. I mean, his mistresses included Lana Turner and Sonia Heaney. And Lena Horne was another one of his mistresses. I mean, he was quite a boy in his own way.
What was he like as a fighter, Reg?
Brilliant. Love watching Joe Louis. I still call him Louis in this country, by the way. No, I think when we argue about number ones, he's got to be up there in the debate, I'm sure. I liked him. I thought Tommy Farr did a wonderful performance. It was his first defence of the championship, Louis. Absolute peak. And to go 15 rounds with him, but he had everything, you know, what the old line about years ahead of his time. I think Louis had that.
But just to throw a spanner in the work, what about Schmeling? What about the defeat to Schmeling? What about...
Yeah, I realise that. I don't think his chin was as good as it should have been. Had he had a stronger chin, I mean, he was knocked over a couple of times. Even Tony Galento put him down, but he got up and knocked him out again. Yeah, I suppose you can allow one, and he was a kid at the time on the first Schmeling fight.
Was he to this point in history, was he the finest heavyweight champion in your opinion?
No, I would have backed Ali to beat him.
No, but up to the 1930s.
Up until then?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he and Jack Johnson
were level.
Jack Johnson was a great defensive fighter. And a great thing about Joe Louis, for me, and I've only seen film of him, he was a tremendous short puncher.
Oh, incredible.
He had this tremendous ability to cut off ring space. And he would get him into corners, and then he would go to work with those short hooks, particularly the left hook. And he had a wonderful jab as well. I mean, it wasn't just a flick. He'd take your head off with the jab. And he had the perfect temperament. And the only thing that was wrong with him, as Reg pointed out, his chin wasn't very good.
No. Not terribly weak. I mean, I saw him for a week. He boxed a week in London just after the war. He had an exhibition at Earl's Court. And Nosher Powell, who's well-known in London, used to spar with him. And one day he said, would you mind not hitting me on the chin? He said, it's beginning to hurt. So the next day he went in, he boxed and he hit him around the ribs and he came back next day. He said, I couldn't get out of bed last night. He said, I'm bruised all over, Joe. He said, could you stop hitting me at all? I mean, that was just playing in the gymnasium, you know what I mean? Not gymnasium, on an exhibition. He was a great fighter.
And physically, what sort of a make of man was he?
No, he had just about the right weight at the at the time. He was a natural heavyweight.
He was a big heavyweight for his day.
For his
he was
day,
over 14 stone.
He only weighed 185 pounds.
Yeah.
But
for his
very
day,
well compact, strong, powerful legs. Upper body was very well built. And all his punches were so short and tight. That's what made him so lethal. Up close, he'd give him that distance and he'd knock your head off.
12
of course, you know, that's also, we've got to be honest about this. He had a fantastic record with 25 defences, which is still the record for the heavyweight division. But, you know, the phrase bum of the month was introduced in the Joe Louis era because he did knock over some real stiffs. I mean, we talk about, you know, poor heavyweights in this day and age. I mean, some of those heavyweights that they fed Joe Louis every few weeks, I mean, you know, it's disgraceful.
But the American public loved it. They don't today. They immediately say, oh, he had a bum to beat, you know what I mean? But they didn't care. As long as Joe was doing it, they didn't mind. That included the white people.
It was before the television age. Now,
exactly, yeah.
Put them up now in front of millions of people, and you'll get one or two critics like ourselves saying, hey, who is this guy he's knocking over?
Well, it's happening today with fighters of the modern era, certainly. Yeah. He did nonetheless reign for 12 years. Nearly 12 years. After him came Rocky Marciano, and the judgment of history about Marciano, the only heavyweight champion in history with a perfect record.
Yeah, but let's be honest, Paul. Dempsey beat an old man in Jersey Joe Walcott. He beat him, and he almost didn't beat him. He was given another one more round. The referee said, and that's all you get, son. And he went out there and done it, and it was fantastic the way he was able to do it. And he was a slam bang, come forward, attacking.
This is Marciano.
It's Marciano we're talking about. Very attractive.
Box office.
And real box office. Wonderful to watch. But not the greatest heavyweight. And you know, if you look carefully at his record, he didn't beat a lot of young, talented heavyweights.
Hardly any.
Hardly any, and he avoided many of them.
And Harry Matthews, I mean, Cockle fought those people. They weren't wonderful.
I got into terrible trouble with a friend of mine who runs Bar Italia in Soho, which is
that's why they call it Barred Heart Italia now.
I tried to explode the Marciano myth, and I also named Marciano number 9 in my all-time top 10 list. And Tony immediately barred me from Bar Italia.
So he should. He's quite right. He's a good judge.
I must say he relented soon afterwards, but because there's a mural of Marciano in Bar Italia, and he's a great hero in there, understandably. But when you examine his record, he was a myth. I mean, he fought, as Barry said, he won the title from a 38-year-old man. His first defence was against the same man, Jersey Joe Walker, who was then 39. And then most of his defences were against built-up light heavyweights. And when you think that Archie Moore, who was also a built-up light heavyweight, was 42 years of age and put him on his backside, dropped him. And I've spoken to Archie Moore about this. And Archie swears to this day, or go to his grave, saying that the referee robbed me of beating Marciano. The referee, I think, was a man called Kaiser. And Kaiser. And when Marciano got up, Kaiser spent an age wiping his gloves.
No, he didn't. We done it during the summer in Golden Gloves, and I'm telling you, he didn't do that. He got him up, and this is all controversy. He got him up, and within 3 seconds he had allowed him to get at Marciano again.
Well, Moore swears to this day that the referee saved Marciano from being knocked out. Now, if I must make one more point.
He did beat the old Joe Louis, by the way.
Oh, yeah, 37 years of age.
I realise that, but I'm
now,
just saying he did beat a great
fighter. About Marciano, he did not take on all comers. There was one man, as Reg said about Dempsey, he would have fought him, but his management wouldn't allow him to fight one man who was 2 stone heavier than Marciano and considered one of the best heavyweights of the era.
And that was?
Nino Valdez of Cuba. Al Will, Marciano's manager, wouldn't let Rocky go in the same town as Valdez because he thought he would get knocked out.
Right, after the period of Marciano, Sonny Liston was the next man really, it seems to have stamped his personality on the heavyweight.
Well, can I make a point? Patterson. I'm not saying Patterson was a great heavyweight, but he did stamp his personality on the
He was then the youngest to win it.
He was the youngest ever to win it. He was a former gold medalist at the Helsinki Olympics at middleweight. And he was a charismatic character, for the simple reason, as Reg said, the youngest ever to win the heavyweight.
Very fast.
Very fast.
Yeah. Tremendous fast hand.
And it's really fascinating. During the summer, as I said, we done the Golden Gloves, and it was tremendously exciting for me to see the comparison between him and Tyson.
He's actually faster than Tyson, really.
But he's exactly the same, only less powerful.
Yeah, same stable.
Same tomato, yeah.
Peekaboo, gloves up
Hands
like
up,
that. And quick head movements.
But he had a glass chin, didn't he?
Is that how you go when you go in the Bar Italia? With
I don't go in forward, walking backwards.
So then we had Liston.
Italian bar.
And Colin, before we have to unfortunately go to another break. We're into the 60s now with Liston and the arrival of Cassius.
I thought Liston.
We'll talk in a lot more detail about Ali after the break, but just before that, can I just have one earliest memory from each of you about Cassius Clay? Reg first.
Well, there's too many memories about Cassius Clay, really, isn't there?
Your earliest memory of him?
Well, you know, probably the Olympics in Rome, when I didn't think I thought he was marvellous at 18 to win it, because I knew 3 of them that he'd beaten. I didn't know the 4th, but I knew the 3, and that was a marvellous performance. But I didn't think he'd be as good as he was, and I didn't realise he'd be as big as he was. And you can't brag afterwards and say, I knew he would, because I didn't. But I kept thinking, at 18 years of age, this guy's different now. Has he got the heart for the game? We always worried about that, especially when he put on this great show when he was fighting Liston at the weigh-in and made out he was crazy. I fell for that a little bit at the time. And anybody who says they didn't is a liar, because he had the sweat, he had everything going. I mean, perfect.
He went to 170.
Perfect act he gave.
But it was,
that's my earliest story I can think of. I'm very fortunate to have lived right through his career. You know,
for me, it was a bit later than that, Reggie. It was the Cleveland Williams performance.
Oh, it was wonderful.
What a fight.
I had a fellow called David Dimbleby sitting next to me. I kept sending him out for the beer. I didn't know who he was.
Well,
and for you, Colin?
My first memory was when he first came to London at the age of 21 to fight Henry Cooper at Wembley in that non-title fight. It was the fight before he won the world title. And, you know, we were very British, and in came this brash young man spouting ridiculous poetry and boasting what he was going to do to our Henry. And let's face it, we all hated him at the time. We wanted Henry to smash him in the mouth and shut him up. And that is it, you know, I thought, you know, this man can't be for real.
He was a genius nonetheless, and when we come back, we'll examine his story in more detail. So to the 1960s, and truly a vintage era in the world heavyweight title division. Barry McGuigan, Colin Hart and Reg Guttridge remembering with me. Reg, when we talk about Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay in the first instance, you've already told me about the kind of impact he made as a personality on the sport. But how important for his standing as a heavyweight was the way he demolished the credibility of Sonny Liston the previous?
Oh, that made him, because I actually thought Liston was going to beat him first time in Miami. You know, the second time I didn't, but the first time I did, because he looked unbeatable. And I think he would have lived a bit of a cleaner life, Liston. He'd have been a great fighter still. I'm not saying he would have licked Ali, because then we realised how good Ali was. The braveness of Ali was the strong point. I mean, this business of besides us in the court, in the shoulder and everything, there's a lot of truth in that, actually. And if you watch the fight, he gets banged up a bit, Liston. He didn't, as we say in boxing, swallow it, because his eye was banged up. And I get a bit angry about that, as it was all pre-arranged. Boxers don't pre-arrange things at that level with the money that's involved. The second fight, talk about the phantom punch. A lot to do with that was Jersey Joe Walcott's refereeing, and also Nat Fleischer interfering with the timekeeper, which he shouldn't have done. He never at any time counted over Liston. I think he would have got up. In fact, I know he would have got up, but he would have probably got knocked out again. In fact, they had, what, half a dozen punches after the referee had stopped it. When he said box on.
Yeah,
so it shows he was still there, but I won't have it that it was fixed, because what did Liston get out of it? He went into obscurity after that. And also, a final thing on that, if we think that was only half a punch, Eamon Andrews, by the way, was sitting on the other side of the ring to me and could see it a bit more his side, and he thought it was a good punch. And he actually knocked Foreman out with a similar punch. Similar type of punch.
It looked a great punch. It was very quickly delivered.
We couldn't believe it at the time. You know, it comes out, it's a and then he used the crack about karate punch and all that, as Ali would. But it turned out it was a good punch, and Liston was probably a lot older than he said he was, and he was certainly hitting the bottle even in those days. Although he looked trained hard, it's what he did when he came out of the gymnasium.
Colin, how much do we base the greatness of Ali around the qualities of the men he dominated in the division at that time? Was it a particularly strong period?
Well, it was what I call the golden age of heavyweights. I mean, there were some brilliant heavyweights around. I mean, when you think that Ali's contemporaries included George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, Larry Holmes,
all world champions.
All world champions. Jerry Quarry, Oscar Bonavina,
They
Ron
would have probably
Lyle,
won
Ernie
Shavers.
Yeah.
I mean, they would all, 4 world titles going
No
today.
danger.
Every one of those guys would have won one of them.
Really?
No doubt
Oh,
about it.
absolutely.
No
Jerry
question.
Quarry would have done it.
No question. Well, I'm saying all of them. The majority of them would.
They would have won.
There's no such thing as a perfect fighter. There's no such thing as a perfect anything. But Ali was the nearest you could get. But I mean, his speed was phenomenal. I'm talking about in his prime. I'm not talking about post-1967-70, where the 3 years. Angelo Dundee says, and I believe him, we never saw the best of Ali. The best of Ali would have been between 1967 and when he came back in 1970. Those 3 vital years, he would have been in his absolute prime. And, of course, he was out because of that draft-dodging business in America over to Vietnam.
Stood on his principle.
Oh, he did.
And
I mean, you've got to. He was a man of great courage in the ring and out of the ring, and a man of, I think, of great principle. And he's a sweetheart of a man too. He's the softest touch in the world, and he had everything for me: charisma, courage, speed, skill. He had everything. He wasn't a devastating puncher, and maybe he wasn't very good going forward. He used to fight, as a counter-puncher.
I thought what he did lack was he lacked the ability to punch to the body. I don't think I ever saw him throw a body punch in my entire life. But he was brilliant. And when he came back after his, well, it wasn't incarceration, but after his time out of boxing, he didn't pick an easy opponent. The first guy he fought was Jerry Quarry.
He was a tough fella.
The second one was Oscar Bonavina, and the third one was Joe Frazier.
And incidentally, Bonavina was a 15-round fight, non-title, which Ali insisted on, and he won it in the last round with the then 3 knockdown rule. I think was the first time.
How did you find Joe? I know you called a lot of these fights. How did you find Joe Frazier as a man?
Oh, great! I'm very fond of Joe. He's a bit like Holyfield. He believes in God and everything. He's got a lot of time for him as a person.
What about this recent statement in the book? With
I know. He caught, when Ali sort of used to chide him and things. Frazier couldn't accept that as a joke. He didn't like being called a gorilla, and I don't blame him and all that. But now he is now. Yeah, it seemed it at the time. But if it was you, Barry, I don't think you would have taken it either.
Well,
you would have gone along with it a little bit, right? And at that time, all that making out he was stumbling, talking, and everything. Ali was very funny to us, the listener, the viewer, whatever. But to Frazier, it hurt a bit, and I could understand, but there was no need for it in view of Ali's present condition. But I see now he wants to make it up, only if Ali says he's sorry for calling that.
Yeah, but
this
it wasn't
fair.
Reg, it wasn't just the gorilla.
Other things.
What really upset Joe Frazier was being called an Uncle Tom.
An Uncle Tom as well, yeah.
There's no worse insult you can give a black man
and Frazier's a
than
very
to call him
decent
an
man,
Uncle Tom.
and that was why.
It was certainly not true. And Ali, as much as I loved him and still do, he could be very cruel. And he had his nasty streak in him. I mean, that fight he had with Ernie Terrell when he rubbed his face along the top rope. I mean, he wasn't...
He obviously didn't like losing to Frazier either.
Oh, no, not at all. And that was one of the all-time great heavyweight fights.
Yeah, in my opinion, the best heavyweight fight there's ever been.
The one in Manila?
The very first one.
Well,
Madison Square Garden, 1971.
And I think the third one in Manila was the greatest of all time.
In effect.
But it's only for one reason, Barry. I know what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. The third one was the greater of the 3, in my opinion, because they were both shot. And they couldn't get out the way of each other. That's why. But it was some.
And they were
fight.
Millionaires at the time, and like gladiators, they didn't have to do it.
The one man from that period who has been a factor since we've been covering boxing together, George Foreman.
Yeah.
Now, when you started covering Foreman's fights, you could not have imagined that here we would be talking about an active.
But for these guys, and they'll be able to relate to this. That to these guys who are purists and who are sort of more sentimentality than I would have, it shows you the state of play today, and it shows you that it reinforces what Colin says, that in the 70s, that was the best era, the golden era of the heavyweights, because nowadays, George come back after 20 years and beat up on the champion, knocked him out in the 10th round.
Changed man as well, isn't he?
46 years old, mellow guy. When he was around the 70s, he was sullen and bad-tempered.
By his own admission.
By his own admission. Well, you remember the thrill.
I thought he was going to hit me in Caracas.
He didn't, actually.
That's right.
I'd have been in his corner for that one.
Because it was over. I used to smoke. I was chain smoking, and I mean, there were witnesses to it. I'm not just making this up. We were around a swimming pool in Caracas before he fought Ken Norton, and I was smoking, and it was in the open, and he said, "Hey, you, put that cigarette out." And I just said to him very calmly, "Say please." And he didn't like that at all. And he went over to the table, and Bill Kaplan, his publicity man, said, "Hey, come on, cut it out."
But you know, half of that problem was because he couldn't do weight. He couldn't. He always liked to come in around 15 stone 10, and he was a big guy, as we now know. But he used to always have to fight to get down to 15, 10. It was a psychological thing. If he didn't get in there,
when they're trying
and when you have to make weight, it makes you really nasty and
But
horrible.
that fight he had with Frazier in Jamaica, I mean, I shall never forget that. I mean, he actually lifted Frazier off his feet with one punch.
The interesting thing about this period also, perhaps, Barry, is that the record says there is a man who deserves to be, on the record, placed up alongside any of the
Without
others.
a doubt.
But he gets no credit, really. Larry Holmes.
You see, because a lot of the purists will think it was a joke. It was just because Moore was a weak champion and he came back. You remember, he failed against Tommy Morrison. He failed against Holyfield and he knocked out Moore. But still, we've got to forget about that and look back at the time. I think he was the most powerful heavyweight of all time.
And apart from those big personalities, then came Larry Holmes.
Oh, you see, talking about Larry Holmes, I think Larry Holmes was probably the best heavyweight champion of all time, bar none. Pure boxing ability, the best heavyweight of all time. You can take in Muhammad Ali, you can take in Jack Johnson, and you know, it was those three for me. But that was the.
He certainly took a good punch.
What a chin!
All he suffered from was following Ali.
That's the problem.
People wouldn't believe him too. I was a great fan of his too. I agree with you. Can I tell you a quick something about Foreman in the '68 Olympics? I was in Mexico doing that one, and a fellow called John Coker, who was from Sierra Leone and represented Sierra Leone and was educated at Oxford and Dublin. So you can imagine he worked for the BBC and everything, and he was a good novice, but he boxed for Sierra Leone. And I used to say to him, "John, look, don't get too excited because you're not going to win anything. Let's make sure you don't get hurt." He used to get quite upset with me. And he boxed the first contest against a Romanian called Alexei. And I said, "It's all right, you'll be all right, you won't get hurt," because he got well beaten on points. But I got hold of him and sat him at ringside and said, "Now, have you looked at the draw? Had you won that, you would have fought this fella who's now in the ring." He said, "What's his name?" I said, "You'll remember it, George Foreman." Well, can you imagine the mismatch of boxing that would have been in an Olympic game? John Coker, bless his heart, in there with George Foreman. And thank God now you've got to qualify to go in it, you know, which he didn't have to do.
Going back to George being a changed man, after he after Holyfield beat him on his, in Atlantic City, knowing what he was when he was a young man, I heard some American boxing writers talking, and they said, "Well, what do you think Foreman's going to do now?" And immediately one guy said, "Go back to being the so-and-so he has always been."
You mentioned Holyfield and Tyson, which brings us conveniently to the modern era. This year, has Evander Holyfield put Mike Tyson into the proper context?
Put him in perspective, absolutely. I've always said that, some of these guys we were talking about, Liston, all in their prime, Liston, Ali, Frazier, Holmes, and there was one other I picked, would all have beaten Tyson in his prime, in my opinion. Tyson was a brilliant heavyweight in a very bad era, but...
Was or is?
Well, I think he was now. He's no longer champion. At the moment, he's a was. Whether he'll come back again, I don't know.
I think Holyfield got it right before the fight when we emphasised this, didn't we, on Sky? That he's never taken the pain in the same way that Holyfield has in those great fights at Riddick Bowe, which will match any fights that anybody's ever seen, including Ali Frazier. And he knew if he could pressure him, and he was right, because he suddenly loses it. It's like a little lost boy he gets in when he's under pressure, as he proved with Buster Douglas, putting his gum shield in the wrong way around and all those sort of things.
He's an on-top fighter.
He's an on-top. He bullies people.
Bully.
And when it doesn't come up for him, he got found out.
And I mean, to be honest, the guys are right. when he came along, the heavyweight title was fragmented into 4 different variations, and there weren't a lot of guys out there with real sort of ability or fortitude or anything.
What about this man, Barry?
Evander Holyfield is you've got to rank him as one of the best heavyweights around. I mean, he's, you know, people say, oh, he was too small, he wouldn't have beaten this guy because he was too short, and he wouldn't have beaten that guy because he wasn't good enough or whatever. But he was good enough. He proved that he could handle the likes of... and, you know, the one thing going into that fight, at the back of my mind, I could always remember the left hook that he almost knocked out Big Bo with, who was 2 stone heavier than Tyson. I thought he's got a puncher's chance, he's got a great chance. But, you know, looking at him and summarising him, I think he's a great fighter and he's got to be recognised as one of the best around.
I am going to just play the role of judge here for a moment. Reg, you've heard all the evidence, and to you first. Will you now name your greatest heavyweight of all time?
Muhammad Ali, biggest heart, most talent.
Colin?
I'm not going to argue with Reg on that one. As clear as I can possibly be about boxing, when it comes to the heavyweight division, Ali, for me, would have beaten them all. My dream fight would have been Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis. Even I would have paid to see that.
Oh, I'm not so sure about that.
And Barry?
Again, I'm consolidating the thought there. Muhammad Ali, to my mind, was the greatest heavyweight of all time. His speed, his ability, and his transcending of boxing, and his flamboyance, everything about him. He was the greatest heavyweight I can ever remember.
One final thought before we close now. Some of the active heavyweights of today, Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, and the emerging group that we now have. Into the new year, what do you see for these boys?
I see, you see, the thing about it is, you know, a fight of that magnitude that Holyfield had with Tyson, he was able to get himself up for that. That was a brilliant performance by him. His adrenaline will never be as high again, even if they fight again. I still think he'll beat Tyson if they fight again. But you've got Bowe out there, who's likely to lose against Galata. But Lewis would have a chance with any of them. And, you know, Henry Akinwande, he could be the cream of the crop.
And, Colin, one other thought as we've looked back through history. Why so few British heavyweights achieving at world level? Because in other weight divisions, Britain has a respectable record.
Yes, but our heavyweights have never been hard enough. They've never been big enough, and they've never been hard enough. And as simple as that. We have a much easier lifestyle in our country than those boys from the ghettos in the United States. No question about it.
Reg, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, it's population as well. Take that into consideration. They've got, you know, fighters in the gyms out there that will win British championships sometimes, you know. Hard enough. I mean, Tommy Farr was hard enough. Don Cockle was a brave fighter. But they just have... And Henry was in his way too, wasn't he? You know, if he didn't bleed. But no, I'm afraid that we just can't handle that. Our boxing style's not good enough, not rough enough.
Does anybody see the possibility, historically, that there will be a man to surpass Ali? Reg?
Oh, inevitably, in time to come, there will be somebody out there that will probably achieve more.
Don't think we'll live to see it, though, Barry.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm
you
35.
May.
No,
well,
I don't know.
Can I just make a point that just take South Africa? There is a population out there which we don't know what is in those townships in South Africa. It could be that there is somebody in Soweto right now who's 10 years of age who may grow into another Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, and Jack Johnson all rolled into one.
And I think the Eastern European kids, that now that the wall has come down, we're seeing emergence of a lot of... We've got Maverick, we've got Galata, we've got Zolkan, who fought Akinwande and wasn't good enough, but there's a lot of young guys coming through there who will be putting their efforts into professional boxing. And, you know, if we get a couple of good coaches and bring them out there and train them in the fundamentals, we could have a lot of world champions over.
You know what you say, Barry, if you're white, you can't fight. I'm talking about the heavyweights.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about
talking about the heavyweights.
No, just wait and see.
Your dream fight, who would have won it?
Ali. Speed. Joe Louis wouldn't have got to, and if he did hit him on the chin, Ali would have taken it.
Yeah,
that is the great thing about Ali. People forget when he, when he was young and pretty, they said, "Oh, this pretty boy. As soon as he gets hurt, he'll disappear. He'll fold." And of course, he proved everybody wrong. I'll never forget the left hook that Frazier hit him with in the 15th and last round in the first fight. It would have knocked most heavyweights, cold.
And remember,
he went down, he rolled over, and he stood up again.
One closing thought about Ali, who's, in my mind, bestrides not only boxing but all sport throughout the entire century, Reg. Do you think he has any regrets about his life?
No, I don't think he does. I really don't. I mean, I know him, I think, fairly well, and I've never heard him. No, I don't think so. He's satisfied with everything. He's such a generous man. You know.
Can I tell a story about Ali to show you Ali the man? And it concerns Reg, and he's probably too modest to tell you. But a few years ago...
When have I got modest? That's a bit worrying.
A few years ago, Reggie was quite sick in hospital in Hammersmith. And Ali came to London, and there was a press conference, and he looked all around, and he knows very few of us by name, but he knows Reggie, he knew Harry Carpenter. And he looked around, and he said, "Where's Reg?" And somebody said, "Oh, well, he's sick in hospital." And he said to his friend Harry Bingham, "We must go and visit him." And he found out where Reggie was, unannounced. He turned up at the hospital in Hammersmith. He walked through the doors. Can you imagine the chaos there was when suddenly Ali walked in here? Reggie was in his room, tubed up. Suddenly the door opened. In walked Ali, and Reggie thought he was hallucinating. Is that right, Reg?
Yeah, I said to him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "No, what are you doing?"
That's a wonderful point at which to finish. Reg, thanks very much. I'm delighted to say you're still hale-hearted with us. Yeah. And to Colin Hart, thank you very much indeed. Really enjoyed your reminiscences today. Barry, as always, a pleasure to work with you. Hope very much you've enjoyed it. The decision is clear, it appears. The best heavyweight of all time, Muhammad Ali. But the arguments are probably only starting. Hope very much you've enjoyed this hour of debate. If you haven't agreed with our guest panel, perhaps it's time you got together with your own friends to argue it out all over again. From us for now, bye for now.